Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. Good evening, our wider Caribbean UE family and our worldwide viewership. The Faculty of Humanities and Education of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, Trinidad, Dean Dr. Heather Cateau, welcomes you to our post-carnival event, Dreadness, Mystic Power, Philosophy and Performance of Shadow, Winston McGarland Bailey. My name is Jessel Murray, the Deputy Dean for Distance and Outreach of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, and it is my privilege to be a host this evening at our opening ceremony. More on that in a moment. Our main event is tomorrow, which will feature panel discussions, a conva, and a Dingole virtual dance party in the evening. Tomorrow we kick off at 9 and we continue through the day with presentations into the evening. So how did Dreadness start? During bi-monthly virtual listening sessions among friends, led by Dr. Suzanne Burke, the head of the Department of Literary, Cultural, and Communication Studies at the faculty, colleagues discovered that the commemoration of Shadow's 80th birthday in 2021 had passed almost unnoticed. Out of these bi-monthly meetings, the idea for Dreadness was born and has evolved into this evening's presentation and a full day of activities tomorrow. On a personal note, living in the small town of Mount Lambert, we saw Shadow moving regularly amongst us in his unfussy way from his home in Mount Hope, which is just over the Eastern Main Road. We can imagine that if he had been here now, he would have wondered what all the fuss is about. He was a man like that. Fortunately, the University of the West Indies was able to honor him with an honorary doctorate in 2018, the year of his passing. So this evening then is the start of our tribute to Shadow, which will feature a keynote address by Rayshawn Pierre and performances in his honor. So here we are, and here we go. Let's start with Dr. Suzanne Burke, who will lead us off with a descriptor of the man. Dr. Burke, via video.
Right now, it's soca wall to wall as we bring on stage contestant number 5, the Dreadman himself, Winston Bailey, the Shadow. Give it up for Shadow!
Raconteur, griot, lyricsman, musical genius, agitator, enigma. These are just some of the words used to describe Shadow, the man, and his music. As we celebrate what would have been his 80th year, we want to treat him nice and recognize his contribution to the Caribbean popular music canon. As he asserted in the song Jump Judges Jump, from his 1977 album Dreadness, from which this symposium takes its name. The world know my music. It's solid like brick. The people enjoy it. They jump to the beat. Indeed, Shadow's unique approach to creating and performing music has had a lasting effect on our society. His powerful messages delivered in relatable, often humorous storylines provide his listeners with sage guidance for negotiating the vagaries of everyday life while acknowledging the inevitability of death. His musical genius paid homage to his ancestral traditions from Tobago while incorporating the musical influences that emanated both from within and outside of the Caribbean. But perhaps Shadow is most remembered for his uncompromising adherence to the aesthetics and politics of blackness, both in his physical style of dress and in his metaphysical embodiment of the concept. This habitus of blackness provides the downtrodden, the dispossessed, and the disenfranchised with the agency to assert that nobody is nobody and everybody is somebody. In short, Shadow's work speaks to the Caribbean condition in ways that are distinctly accessible, resonant, and revolutionary, as a form of joy and as a portal for release. It is our distinct honor to present Dreadness, the mystical power, philosophy, and performance of Shadow.
A chicken and chips and a patty with meat, a glass full of milk and a half of a bread, and after that he fall down and dead. So boy, I in trouble.
Memories, Dreadness. Thank you, Dr. Burke. It's just wonderful to see and to hear about the man, the symposium, introduction tonight, and of course all day tomorrow starting at 9 a.m. Shadow is music. That talent was bequeathed to many members of his family. It is with great pride that we present Iennesha Bailey, the eldest of his grandchildren. Her stated aim is to positively impact the world through music, and already she has followed her grandfather, composing calypsos in 2021 and writing her first song, in 2020 and writing her first song in 2021. At the tender age of 12, she has already been working with her father, Julien, in providing background vocals to singers in studio. We warmly welcome Iennesha singing her grandfather's Shadow's My Belief.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, 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 no. But you can't change me. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, 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 no. But you can't change me. Man can't change my destination. Man can't give me suffocation. Man can't treat me very evil. Man can't get me into trouble. Man can't take my wife, change my life, leave me in grief. But no man can change my belief. For I believe in the stars in the dark night. I believe in the sun in the daylight. I believe in the little children. I believe in life and its problems. You could rob me, you could beat me, you could cheat me, but you can't change me. You could take out my eyes and then cause me to cry. You could tell me a lie, but you can't change me. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, 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 no. But you can't change me. Oh yeah, 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 no. Man can't blind me from the daylight. Man can't cheat me of my birthright. Man can't keep me far from riches. Man can't place me into debtors. Man can't pull my crown, pull me down. Even the best thief can never take my belief. For I believe in the stars in the dark night. I believe in the sun in the daylight. I believe in the little children. I believe in life and its problems. You could rob me, you could beat me, you could cheat me, but you can't change me. You could dig out my eye and then cause me to cry. You could tell me a lie, but you can't change me. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, yeah, but you can't change me. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No. Man can take away my honor. Man can turn success into failure. Man can take away my gladness. Man can fill my heart with sadness. Man can turn my crown, pull me down. Even the best thief can never take my belief. For I believe in the stars in the dark night. I believe in the sun in the daylight. I believe in the little children. I believe in life and its problems. You could rob me, you could beat me, you could cheat me, but you can't change me. You could dig on my eye and then cause me to cry. You could tell me a lie, but you can't change me. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but you can't change me. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but you can't change me.
Oh gosh, you see, I was smiling. I was just bobbing and bopping and bopping. Iennesha, oh gosh, I believe in grandfather. Yes, wonderful to have you. Thank you so much. Hearing all those lyrics, you could dig up my eye, but you can't change. Yeah, nice. It is now my privilege to introduce the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, Dr. Heather Cateau, the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Education at the University of the West Indies in St. Augustine. And Dr. Heather Cateau has been a supporter of this project, of this symposium from the start, and she joins us this evening to bring greetings. Dean Cateau.
Good evening. I really have to change up my start and simply say to Iennesha, I hope you are headed for the Faculty of Humanities and Education. Okay, so book your ticket. I look forward to you joining us. Our host and Deputy Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, Mr. Jessel, the head of our Department of Literary, Cultural and Communication Studies, Dr. Susan Berg, our keynote speaker, and I remember our former student, Mrs. Rayshawn Pierre, our esteemed performers, K.V. Charles, Iennesha Bailey, Keishaun Julien, my colleague and cultural studies graduate student, Mr. Sean Samad, members of staff who joined us, cultural practitioners, followers and researchers of the mighty shadow, our students. Welcome to our version of Dreadness. As we commemorate 80 years of the impact of this cultural icon, the mighty shadow, I can't help but reflect on the fact that the social and cultural messages that he gave us or gifted us through his music resonate so very clearly and powerfully today. It is no exaggeration to say that in the last 2 years, we have all been feeling the feeling in a multitude of ways. We now live in a period where tension is commonplace and basement exist in several forms in various places. It is indeed a time when we are really rethinking what is life, just as Shadow advocated. There cannot be a better time to remember our Shadow, our native wise man, who also served as our conscience while making us jump and dingolate. We instinctively dubbed him not just Shadow, but the mighty Shadow. This was because we sensed that the role he would play in establishing a fresh philosophical base for our contemporary Trinbagonian times would be very important. I don't even think we really understood what was taking place. He also knew that we needed to not only jump and degouler, but at times to even play the devil. It is therefore important that we commemorate close to what would have been the 80th birthday of a cultural icon whose musical and lyrical rhythms continue to vibrate in our very being. The Faculty of Humanities and Education is proud to host this event. I am especially pleased that this initiative is being led by the Department of Literary, Cultural, and Communication Studies with collaboration from the Department of Creative and Festival Arts. Dr. Bailey, if he were here with us at the University of the West Indies, this is where he would have been based. It is therefore political justice that they have worked so hard to honor him today. I have described Dr. Eric Williams, another cultural icon, as someone who continues to haunt our academic corridors. I will describe Dr. Bailey as a mighty shadow that is still cast in our cultural corridors. The baseman is still pounding in our heads in 2022. In a period when the humanities are threatened, I keep telling my students, dare to be different. There can be no better example than shadow. Caribbean development now demands local innovation and entrepreneurship. Again, echoes of the mighty shadow. We live in an era where our social consciousness needs awakening. The call was already made by shadow. The mighty shadow had demonstrated the ability to communicate to us all in a language we all understand and yet stay true to himself. This ability continues to elude us today. He was indeed our wizard in more ways than one. Once described as an uncrowned king, he has 2 road march titles, a Calypso monarch title. He was the second person to hold both the road march and the international soca monarch titles simultaneously. He was awarded the Hummingbird Silver Medal in 2003, and in 2014 was the Sunshine Award Hall of Fame. In 2018, he received an honorary Doctor of Letters from the UE posthumously. However, just maybe he didn't need a crown. He was the king of the people. And as a people, he nourished our souls from the 1970s and continues to uplift us and make us pause to think in 2022. Let us appreciate and understand and enjoy the essence of his dreadness. Let us think about how he shaped us all. We are therefore going to do some things in this conference that we don't usually see on conference programs. We are going to try and understand the music jambi, and in the process, we hope to bring down some rhythm. We are actually going to ask some people if they're looking for horn, and we are going to delve into this philosophy of dreadness. And of course, as a Faculty of Humanities and Education, we cannot end this without a little dingoli. Thank you for joining us to hear the baseman for his 80th birthday. Thank you to the head of the department, Dr. Susan Burke, and our Deputy Dean, Mr. Jessel Murray, and your hardworking team for giving us the signal that it is time to remember, it is time to celebrate, and for reminding us that while we jump up, we must also understand the wizardry and how he honed his craft. Welcome to Dreadness. Join us as we examine the mystic power, philosophy, and performance of the shadow. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Cateau. for the warm words of encouragement and support, and reminding us that yes, he was the mighty shadow, a word that he never gave to himself, and that he was our wizard, our, at one time, uncrowned king. But of course, he was a multiple award winner from Trinidad and Tobago, the mighty shadow. So we now move on to our keynote speaker. And our keynote speaker this evening is Rayshawn Pierre. Rayshawn Pierre is an award-winning storyteller, theater director, performer, cultural researcher, and creative content designer. As an avid folk arts researcher and practitioner, a significant portion of her creative work is anchored in using Caribbean folk narratives and traditional forms for the purposes of education and entertainment. Mrs. Pierre holds a double major, Bachelor of Arts in Theatre Arts and Carnival Studies, with first-class honors from the University of the West Indies in St. Augustine, Trinidad, and she was the valedictorian for the faculty in her year of graduation. Currently, she is the artistic director of the Tobago Performing Arts Company, where she marries her convivial spirit with her passion for community arts, outreach, traditional arts, and training. She has designed and completed upwards of 200 community and corporate outreach projects, and she has successfully mobilized and managed original and sustainable community-based projects. We welcome Mrs. Pierre, Rayshawn Pierre, to deliver the keynote address for Dreadness on the theme, Uncovering the Canon, the Sound of Social Agency. Welcome, Rayshawn Pierre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murray. And good evening, everyone. Top your bow, Mr. Fiddler. Oh, hi. When a man a walk him road, him really think about legacy. Or the fact that him could be the subject of intense scrutiny. But not all man make equal. And that me know, especially when part of them source inspiration and the traditional ingenuity at Tobago. So let me take eye upon what journey, where difference and brilliance intersect. So we could bookmark in the history, the importance of respect. This no once upon a time, wire bend story and business. This are the clarion call, where once and for all, we have a deal with Dreadness. Drag your bow, Mr. Fiddler. At this point, it is typical that the bow and the fiddle will play, but your imagination will have to do for today. A very pleasant good evening to the Dean of the Faculty for Humanities and Education, Dr. Cateau, Deputy Dean with the responsibility for student outreach, Mr. Jessel Murray, Dr. Susan Burke, Head of the Department of Literary, Cultural and Communication Studies, and all other specially invited guests. I would like to thank the organizing committee, whom I believe was acting on ancestral wisdom to honor Winston Bailey, the mighty shadow, in this way. I feel truly honored to have been able to sit at Shadow's feet through his music, which continued to direct us. I have never been this enthusiastic in all my life to analyze darkness. Darkness in its mystery, its uncertainty, but also in its beauty. I would like to begin by stating that displacement puts you on several sides of the social gaze. There is something so incredibly powerful about being different that makes similarity feel like that which should be avoided. I would also like to declare that the dictionaries do not provide a large enough scope for the word dreadness, and perhaps this is a good thing, because the last thing we need is a vantage that traps us into examining from a lens that cannot vividly reveal and then magnify our reality, or worse, the reality we must come to grasp. This means, for our point of departure, I will firstly attempt to contextualize dreadness by separating it from its conventional associations and reassessing it to unearth its unspoken, undeclared possibilities. Fitting, He whom we are brought together to celebrate and venerate has given himself a title which he claims to have received by a workman in Tobago while casually walking along his way, which is one that many of us understand and can agree is a sub-implication of the word dreadness. So what does it mean? Dreadness is disruption. This has less to do with the dominant worldview and everything to do with the will to dismantle that which has been deemed common but dysfunctional and at any possible cost. Dreadness is subversion, a delinking from the social ideals associated with the rat race of wealth generation, upward mobility, and perhaps the most significant academic elevation toward a troubling of that which is so dire. The only way to deal with it is to confront it. Dreadness is dialogical. If permitted, it opens pathways to popular discourse about statistically popular people and liquefies the bold line between the fence holders and the gatekeepers. Dreadness is a strategy for survival. It is inward looking and facilitates the opportunity to self-affirm, self-develop, and significantly self-critique. Each of these are important in the process of becoming whole. In a space where self-determination has been tabled as a high priority item, dreadness can potentially furnish us with the will to navigate the lingering uncertainty of where we are headed. Dreadness is a way of being. For a society on the verge of shifting its ideals and making space for an ingenuity that all could connect to, the need for vanguards who not only spoke fear, which was particularly synonymous with the time, but who understood that the real fear rested around the fringes of his shadow. He knew that the fear which had been instilled in us would sometimes outlast the ambitions that we had set for ourselves. And so by verbal or visual proclamation, he advanced a new way of seeing, being, reconciling, and negotiating, reversing the commonplace and often leaning into the darkness, constantly calling on a higher power, an obia, a drumbeat, which we shall talk about later, which was seated in a seemingly lower locale, but whose omnipotence could only be conjured through acts of courage, unconformity, and, well, dreadness. We must attempt to deconstruct the persona to understand this aesthetic of dreadness of which we speak. But before we do, I want to question who is art meant to serve? While some might argue that it must elevate the community from which it emerges, there is an intrinsic role it must play in helping us to understand the artist himself. It must therefore argue his logic or lack thereof, advance his agendas, and if he sees it as invaluable, carve a path through which he interrogates the normalities and abnormalities in his immediate environment. Shadow's establishing of the correlation between blackness, darkness, and dreadness gives us both roots to position him as a deadly emancipator, one born for a time before now and a time long after ours. It is through his positioning of blackness, the aesthetic of dreadness is made accessible. Shadow's predilection for blackness as both symbolism and as a living manifestation of his ideologies leaves room for his treatment of black to be deconstructed. We simply cannot access dreadness without analyzing its relation to blackness or darkness and vice versa. This aesthetic of dreadness of which we speak and which many might be compelled to reduce to Shadow's dress and the characteristics of same provides partial context for this analysis. What we should not betray are the long-standing examples of heroic blackness which have, like Shadow, reinvented themselves in performance and ritual. These traditional warrior archetypes, who each fall under similar designation, is our first attempt at establishing dreadness as a way of being. I shall begin with Pupul, the fierce and fearless counterpart of the Tobago speech band, who is known for more than his brave talk, but his challenging social mediocrity and injustices. Often interchangeably called Lucifer, Pupul's confronting social ills through his menacing antics, used discomfort as the tool for inciting his reckoning. Through Pupul, a critical awareness and participatory action as a response to our reality is instigated. Question: Why is Popo the only character in the band that is restrained by chains? Why does he veer from the political correctness of the band to walk in his Bajan sensibility? Why does he whine past the system to speak directly to his people? Importantly, who will we depend on to provide these answers for us? Next, the midnight robber, the ruthless gunslinger who activates in the oral tradition of the carnivalist to remind us of both his literary power and place in the social order. The robber's expressing of his fearsome experiences, which he has either endured or can inflict, is more than a threatening of society and an exaltation of himself. It is a strategic reversing of the power structure which claims to have informed his agency by redesigning his reality as an ongoing vital act. His painting of circumstances which are seemingly unfathomable articulates a limitless imaginary which professes to rectify and vindicate the issues which have bombarded his kind. The robber is one of the few characters who ceremoniously revels in the experience of death to disrupt the fear of dying. Masking as a form of indirect revelation becomes a significant power negotiation tool for the aesthetic of Dreadness. Lastly, the Jab Molasi, one of the clearest indications of the victories of resilience against oppression. The Jab's mask is less about concealing and more about revealing and facilitating space to resolve greater social contradiction. The devil in his becoming defies the narrow binaries of beauty and immorality by laying claim to a higher irrefutable power to embrace the indecent, disruptive, marginal. Philip Kerr reminds us that whether explicitly or implicitly, when the marginal is embraced as a form of revolt, it carries with it the potential for further marginalizing. Agreeably, this has been the case for the devil, who is still the subject of fear and oftentimes scorn, but most importantly, misunderstanding. When the devil's organizing principles collides with the social code he holds as secret, the resistance he sets out to perform is activated. Dreadness is intentional. It is not simply about inciting fear. These are but a few examples, each existed within a similar conceptual continuum and revealing the duties of darkness to remind us that a black cape and black pain cannot make us, or any personality for that matter, dread. Winston Bailey's long cloak and inner jumpsuit branded with the finished frame of a skeleton as an enunciation of black is therefore not the lens, but the vector which acts as the site for confronting self, society, and social pressures. It is my hope that we become inclined to look beyond the visual darkness and begin to question the how and why, because it is in the why we can arrest his agency. He acts a performative rebellion which is constantly in operation, since, by many standards, it does not fit ideal public culture, whatever that means. His stance reminds us that we must not wait for voices and authorities, much like Shadow, who knew, but who will attempt to claim to understand our ingenuity for their own aggrandizing, when we can make sense of some of these things for ourselves. We do Bajanism, darkness, and in this case, dreadness a disservice when we relegate it to a look, feel, or texture. Rather, and by Shadow standards, it is a way of walking. In its often isolationist stance, it invokes, disrupts, and troubles in order to present that which cannot be confronted under normal circumstances. Shadow, like the custodians of darkness, which I have named, have never been afraid of what it means to be dark. They transcend the invocation of fear and terror to argue that violence, whether verbal or otherwise, is an almost offensively necessary act for dismantling old and emerging power structures whose mandate is to maintain oppressive subordination. To do this, he symbolically manipulates variations of darkness to bring to focus the problems that we do not speak of under normal circumstances. Dreadness is not a temporary add-on. It does not dress up, perform, go home, repeat. You either is or you is not. It helps us to confront Black not as the finale, but as the beginning, as transcendent, regenerative, emancipatory, innovative, committed to the mobilization of not one or some, but all. It is one which has facilitated Shadow's urge, capacity, confidence, and energy to create anew and to question who we have always been told we must be, aspirants of others. One of the ways Shadow is able to overtly refuse a system which has projected the ways it sees our people and the way in which we should function is when he overtly refuses to copy the styles borrowed from Eurocentric traditions, particularly those that were viewed as dignified. If we look closely, by the end of the 1970s, the suit continued to reflect his resistance against that which was emerging as customary in the Afro and Dashiki tradition. By maintaining his all-black persona, fully masked in his black bodysuit, often imprinted with a white skeleton, he, as posited by Tamiko Moore, is intentional about wearing his non-conformity and, by extension, his agency. This agency has fueled his confidence in his obia, recognizing, according to Professor Rex Nettleford, that power comes to all of us who are able to make definitions about ourselves on our own terms and to proceed to act on the basis of such definitions. He deals with that which is sacred through the lens of the profane to disrupt the Euro-dominant value systems and the lingering burns of the colonial project and its adverse effects on our people, particularly those that had seated themselves on the high chairs and judges' table in the Calypso fraternity. At this juncture, we examine the intersections between his style and his agency. Amidst the difficulty of existing in a world failing to even attempt to understand a personality like Bailey's, his agency became that truth he believed was necessary to speak. Admittedly, to truly unpack the way Shadow's agency can be used to confront our evolving challenges, we may need to make this conference an annual feature. I maintain there is much that can be deconstructed, unlearned, challenged, and then rebuilt if we sit with Shadow's philosophies. There is too significant redirection we can provide our youth who are still challenged by the hardship of class and racial bracketing, to name a few, and the implications of same, and to our children who are learning and experiencing the social science in the absence of practical methods and means of application. Shadow's ideologies have never been for archival museums and gold-plated plaques. And while I have no issue with celebrating the icon in this way, I also maintain that our responsibility is to render the next generation ready by granting them that which we have perhaps taken too long to utilize. We will never be short of solutions. Least we take responsibility for the growing, fractured relationship between education and practice, both of which stands as hallmarks of Shadow's way. While the obvious disjuncture between where we came from and where we are heading remains intact, we must begin to speak to both our singular and collective agency, which again, Shadow provides the direction. This need for conversations that do not flutter around the issues which are pivotal to our development, but go to the core by unleashing the problem in its nakedness is significant for us. Agency is, therefore, the actioning of that which is believed to potentially influence, impact, or transform. Cultural agency is concerned with the use of cultural material to affect change among a specific group. Shadow's agency has undoubtedly been a combination of both, rooted in an epistemology of its own order, adhering to its own systems, echoing voices with song like the ones it is speaking on behalf of, and standing in the confidence of its own selfhood. Shadow's agency, if ever simply put, is a call to dance and fight. And in true calendar style, he leaves nothing to chance. I have observed closely. He solemnly strides onto the stage at the Queen's Park Savannah, backed by an entourage dressed in black, to question, what's wrong with me? Unusually so, he does not stand stock still in front of the microphone as he would usually do, but intentionally trails across the stage. Shadow mastered a delicate way of dually talking to himself while talking to us. In asking what's wrong with me, he inevitably asks, what is wrong with us? This type of questioning, which undergirds what he believes people knew, but had not yet action, or in some instances had accepted, can be found across Shadow's most celebrated hits and in some of his lesser known works. Bailey's style is an undeniable amalgam of complicated occurrences which position him to question constantly every facet of life. And I think you will agree with me when I say so many of us are better off because of his questioning. He exclaims in song, I ran away from home when I was little. Night and day I roam, I seen plenty trouble. Many, many days I had nothing to bite, no place to rest my head when I'm tired in the night. I went up Laventille, day and night I study. Come down to the city like a walking symphony. They take all my music, disguise it as soca, deprive me of credit which I owned while I suffer. I am a master of music and I'm bad with my lyric. I am very consistent and I am blessed with contentment. But the way they just treat me like calypso bubbly is really a heartbreak. Maybe my birth was a mistake. This lifelong journey which he paints in song gives a close insight into the hardship that he has endured from boyhood to full maturity. He cleverly writes into being his life story, not as a means of seeking empathy, but as a way of positioning his unending battle in the foreground of life as a marginal. The unresolved conflicts between the social moral values and aspirations that have been given to us, which the calypso has been a catalyst for negotiating, had begun to face a kind of political pressure that subjugated it to specific lines of function. While it remained the voice for the voiceless, that voice required crafting along particular lines if it were to achieve full enunciation. According to Professor Gordon Roulette, recognizing that the calypso can tell nothing like the full truth of the society and probably only a limited truth about its margin. Shadow seats himself on the seams of the system and its rigorous structures to create a distinctive way of negotiating troubling circumstances. He recognizes that while culture is liberating, it can be a tool for silencing. Shadow's agency has been to instigate a type of consciousness that would exist long after the jam session, as we like to call it, had ended. It was an activation of the exterior, the body, the hands, the waist, the leg, through the fling back and wind back and throw your hand in the air. So as Tony Hall puts it, find the interior, activate the exterior to find and position the interior. This interior was the site where the awakening of the themes he presented intersected with a man's natural inclination to follow the rhythm within which the message was couched. In doing so, he was able to nourish and preserve the cultural, collective spirit of the audience while simultaneously doing the same for himself. This is perhaps the reason why he remained one of the most misunderstood men who walked amongst us. This agency is expressed through the conjunction of his personal, lived experiences and his treatment by the society he was trying to serve. He continues to question in song, what's wrong with me? Am I ugly or what? A bad lucky or what? I cause death or what? I smell like cigarette or what? Each question underscores a different moral code which is considered unpopular. It is his treatment that drives him to trigger discourses which were brewing in the underclass to fully eliminate the currency and urgency of these discourses that were necessary to happen and exist amongst the so-called middle and upper classes. In a prior interview before an electrifying offering of Pay the Devil, he notes, the voice of the people is the voice of God. But now I'm going out there and anything can happen. I want to see the day when they eliminate this thing and just watch the thing when it happens and say you are and you just be. That was him laughing. That was him laughing at the end of the statement. This thing which he refers to is the structure of the Calypso competition, which arguably had deviated from its initial intent. Agreeably, this has been partly due to the evolving politicization of every aspect of national life as stated by Louis Regis. Between the battle for authentication and the demonizing of radicalism, national consciousness continues to be more philosophical than it is practical. It is more answer-giving than it is problem-arresting. It seeks to reward conformity over ingenuity. It leaves little room for collective inquiry and discovery. All of these things fuel Shadow's agency. If the calypso I'm questioning do not arouse our consciousness and drive us to question that which have become normal around us, does it lose a vital part of its function? It is my conviction that our agency should direct us. Shadow's preoccupation and fascination with life and death, morality and immorality, transgression and elevation made him accessible. And within the genius of this accessibility, he capably speaks a multiplicity of things, not as a textbook authority, but as the messenger, confronting and conforming to the direction given by his obia. And because obia and dreadness are not diametrically opposed, we cannot deny the responsibility required in walking in a way that many people may not necessarily understand. And when I consulted my own jumbies, they demanded that I leave the jumbie discourse for the conclusive end of this address. And since my typical stubbornness does not apply to them, I have obliged. We shall deal with the intelligentsia of jumbieism in a moment. This idea of being, which Shadow unmistakably leans into, conjures a strict obedience to his calling. His denouncing of this thing and his hopes in simply being able to be gives us further context for situating and understanding his agency. This agency transports him from his creative imagination through a world of intricate complications and then positions him as the living spirit of regeneration. Not only is this agenda driven by providing multiple angles for analyzing the same problem, but it is dually questioning what gives his agency. It is this questioning, the way in which he questions, that gives his agency its lasting impact. It is Shadow's way of questioning that sets him apart from all other poets in the calypso genre. How can a man say so little, yet provide such a lasting imagery? How is meaning given to taboo discourses, thereby creating access for all? It is a simple economy of language, tied to a simple way of seeing life, which makes the Shadow's storytelling so palatable and accessible. To perambulate the complexities of social politics, sexuality, and gender marginalization, Shadow's first approach is to speak to the value metrics associated with the upward mobility of the social order. He sings, "Poverty is hell, and the angels are in heaven, driving in their limousine where everything is nice and clean." Shadow voices a class struggle firstly from his experience with poverty, then proceeds to articulate the cyclic makeup of poverty and the courage that is required to be poor. The courage required to be poor. And if you've never given it any thought or consideration, it takes courage to be poor. Along with these social dimensions, the unchanging implications associated with impoverishment has too found residency in his lyrics. He exclaimed, "He gone in the court and he lost the case. The persecutor say he have a bandit face." Shadow is able to capture both the hardships and the unending struggle associated with wearing particular birth labels. The bandit face he enunciates is an inescapable tenet that has been ascribed to some marginals. This hamster wheel cycle in the first instance is an expression of the way of living for a particular class, but it also eliminates the issues of othering amongst these same classes who are made to occupy the lowest treaders of the social ladder. A treader, these treaders, Shadow has also had to climb. He furthers by lamenting that the dreams of the poor are the only thing they have to look forward to. Amidst these myriad dreams, he returns to the unattainability of same, which is the reality of some. What Shadow does not offer is a weighty point of access. In one video recording of the performance, a woman throws her hands up in the air and slowly gyrates backward to the pulsating base of poverty's hell. Shadow's genius is integrating the turmoil which he paints vividly in song with a rhythmic finishing that is guilty of making the average patron fail to realize his problematizing of said turmoil. He performs a similar task which you're looking for horn and unwanted children, where he deals with the issues of gender, sex, and sexuality. Here he dismantles some regulatory fiction to ask a series of direct questions. How you want to marry? You ain't have no money. You ain't walking nowhere. You ain't have a baby. You think it's joke? Cateau presents the known characteristics of the issues and the conditions of the characters with who faces these issues, which are not new to us. Cateau does not commit us to mindless obedience. Rather, he leads us toward active participation. The music is therefore the power tool, and the opportunity to engage the meaning is a choice we make after we've started tapping our feet and nodding our heads. This does not diminish the power of shadows wanting to speak to us in a way that we innately understand: music, dance, and storytelling. One other example is the repurposing of the legend of the Sukunia, where he uses his characteristics. He uses her characteristic to confront the HIV epidemic. The story, although familiar, provides new instructions. He forces us to see blood and testing in a new light. Intelligently, he bridges the world of medicine and Western folkways, wrapped in, couched in, encased in that will and longing to get up and dance, which inevitably helps us to navigate what many can agree is still a dual epidemic, which is the fear of the virus. The way in which Cateau is able to connect folk, life, and the creative imagination is unrivaled. We are forced to deconstruct his obia. The late Tony Hall once said to me, "You see that voice in your head? The one that don't shut up? That is the voice you have to listen to." It is to my personal conviction that the artist nurtures his own zombie. I have characterized mine by a vibe, a pulse, a nudge, or sometimes a provocative urge to move, do, and create. Do not confuse zombies with ordinary spirits. Zombies, like Dreadness, are intentional, and creative zombies are bold-faced direction givers. In an interview with Caribbean Insights, Cateau notes, "Even if I leave Calypso, the Calypso will never get out of me." His music zombie, which he had cultivated and created space for from childhood, had assumed its permanent position. If any of you are wondering if creative zombies can be cultivated, I think the answer is yes. They stick with those who have decided to relentlessly follow their own path. They latch on to potency, and in the face of uncertainty, they are fueled by spirit, will, heart, and courage. Paloma Muhammad reminds us that if we can somehow reinterpret the universal characteristics which we ascribe to myth and superstition, they can be transformative. They can serve us in ways that we cannot imagine. In Cateau's road march hit Baseman, he expresses his fear of the consequence of leaving Calypso and pursuing an alternate life. The baseman he hears in his head is an articulation of what he claims has been his fuel. He too attaches an unexplainable set of characteristics to the vibe and voices which occupy his most sacred creative space, his head. The zombie lives in his head. He casually shares with an interviewer, "When people hear my name called as the next singer, the mood has changed." While many might ascribe this experience to the usual happenings of fandom, the reception of Cateau by audiences was different. In a performance of Pay the Devil, even before he's revealed to the audience, the crowd goes into a ground-pounding uproar. His zombie precedes him. It is an unexplainable living part of his being, one which sits silently by, but yet is powerful enough to clear the path. It is fed by his unending creative imagination and housed within his creative spirit, much of which we have been fortunate to experience. Cateau notes, "I might never be able to write all the songs in my head in this lifetime. His connection to nature, beauty, children, and the joy of living in fullness, which he espouses in his composition of My Belief, reflects his source, the simple, the natural, his obia. It is his constant depositing of this creative imagination through his music that has made his obia so undeniable. Roll Titus, also known as Axback, reminds us that death has always mystified man. Lekito Tobago, which has been immortalized in our local world of folk as being the playground for zombies and other characters of the mythical world, remains the site where Shadow's philosophy and ideology collide. He uses hell as the crucible for correction, particularly for those who he believed acted as law unto themselves. Shadow's alienation puts him in a position of power. It afforded him the opportunity to not only resist forms of oppression that were disguising themselves as rules and instructions, but it also allowed him to identify the people who were deserving of such penalties. Titus cautions that this force that exists between life and death, the known and the unknown, is just as sacred as any religious practice. And whether through acceptance or otherwise, the sacredness and divinity of death remain a mystery to human being, and it also remains that which we are forced to grapple with for all of our existence. It is Shadow's own spiritual prowess which allows him the freedom to be by invoking that which he has always been. His force is his jumbi, and his jumbi is his legacy. A Bantu proverb advises that all of us are no more than a manifestation of those who have gone before, those living and those yet unborn. And it is fitting that before we attempt to personify Shadow's individuality, contribution, and power, that we recognize Shadow as not having left us, but as having enriched us. Having permanently occupied space among us, I hope that in closing, we never attempt to place his work in the corners of some archive museum, but that we allow it to grow in the spaces it has proven to best thrive, the homes, heads, and hearts of our people, particularly those who are coming behind us. It goes without saying that at a certain point, words ring hollow, even when they are the right words spoken from the right voices. At a certain point, success in one area is defective in uncovering the mounting deficiencies in another area. Admittedly, we have not done a good job at preserving the legacies of our people. We do not need permission to do that. And while I have no doubt that Shadow's music will outlive generations of us, what I am asking for is an intentional treatment of what he has given to us. It is also for this reason I commend the organizing team for having honored Winston Bailey in this way. And while we consider doing what we can, where we stand, I leave with the hope that many of us will be moved to rise up from the comforts of conformity, to challenge those things we believe to be unjust and imbalanced, mindful that Shadow, his power, agency, and dread philosophy is both behind us and ahead of us. I thank you.
Rayshawn Pierre, uncovering the canon, the sound of social agency. When you began your presentation this evening, you gave a sort of narration and said, here is where the music would have happened and so forth. I'm narrating the sound of the clapping. The clapping selfie is up for you. Yes, it's in the chat. Look for it amongst the stars. This is a brilliant address. This is an exhortation to us, as you have stated, for those coming behind, that this cannot be a one-off experience. And I hope you're looking at the chat, because the chat is going on and on. Yes, and we hear it at the University of the West Indies. We thank you for joining us, for reminding us that right at the beginning, there's the definition of dreadness, the dictionary definition of dreadness is not going to stand. I wrote that down immediately. You said you're opening the pathways to popular discourse. You said the dreadness and the number of characters that you talked about. You're talking about a strategy of survival. You talked about how Shadow had to move from poverty and he understood what it is like. I love the analogy that when people get to heaven, they're driving around in rather superior types of automobiles. Quite some imagery. Yeah, and you spoke about embracing and going past the myths of superstition, including the zombies. Yes, and that Shadow was our own personal type of person who said, yes, he had a zombie and he went with it, and he had so much yet to offer, but just time didn't allow for him to do it. But we have time, and therefore we have to continue to unpack without sort of storing it away in, what we academics sometimes could do, storing it away in, in nice files. No, we're going to keep it alive. And this is a wonderful address. Congratulations. And I know that the committee on behalf is going to say thank you for this opening and enriching and setting the tone for all our three major sets of presentations tomorrow at 9 and at 11 and at 1 o'clock. You have started the conversation, and I'm sure that persons are going to reference it tomorrow. Yes, thank you so much. So we move on to the second performance this evening. And Keishaun Julien is a Tobago-based pianist. You can see hint, hint. And Keishaun is a proud graduate of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, with a degree in musical arts, and is a freelance musician who, among other matters, is a past member of the award-winning UE Art Steel and a current member of Our Boys Steel in Tobago. In 2021, he was awarded first place in the International Panogramma Competition. More applause. We welcome him in his performance of a tribute to Shadow. On stage, Keishaun Julien. Ah, yes, pride in our University of the West Indies at St. Augustine graduates, Rayshawn Pierre, followed by Keishaun Julien. So sadly, we are drawing to a close of our opening ceremony of Dreadness, which of course will be followed tomorrow with our presentations in the symposium, our convoi, and our dance party. And it's been a wonderful evening. And I'd now like to invite Sean Samad, who is a doctoral student in cultural studies at the University of the West Indies, to provide thanks to all who made this evening possible, as well as for the advanced work for tomorrow's symposium. Mr. Samad, we welcome you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm honored to have the opportunity to give a vote of thanks on this special day. We give thanks to the Creator and to all of our ancestors who walked the path before us and upon whose shoulders we stand. We give thanks for the life, work, and impact of Mr. Winston Bailey, the mighty shadow, who we celebrate and honor in this symposium. We thank all who have contributed to the opening night, Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, Dr. Heather Cateau, and Mr. Jessel Murray, Deputy Dean, Distance and Outreach of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, Mrs. Rayshawn Pierre, who delivered an impactful, thought-provoking, and inspiring keynote address, the music tributes by Iennesha Bailey, Keishaun Julien, and KV Charles. We thank members of our technical team from the Dean's Office, Ms. Naomi Howard and her assistants, Mrs. Wendy Maynard and the team at Marketing and Communications, Mr. Jessel Murray and the team of the Outreach Committee, Mr. Louis McWilliams, Head of the Department of Creative and Festival Arts, and his staff, Ms. Lynn Parks, students and staff at the Film Unit, and Dr. Suzanne Burke, Head of the Department of Literary, Cultural, and Communication Studies, and her staff. We give thanks for the vision, work, and support of the Groundation Foundation Committee members, Dr. Suzanne Burke, Mr. Omari Ashby, Mr. John Gill, and Ms. Erica M.B. Ashton for conceptualizing and working on the planning and execution of this symposium. We give thanks to all those who will engage us with presentations on Shadow's work at our symposium tomorrow, and DJs John Gill, Honey Colada, and Kabuki, who will bring the best of Shadow's music to us tomorrow evening. Finally, we thank all who have shared information on the symposium, who will support, attend, and participate in this celebration of a master Calypsonian and son of our soil. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samad, and for all that you have done as well. And so before we wrap up our opening ceremony for Dreadness, like Mr. Samad, I want to remind you that we have a whole day of activities tomorrow starting at 9. Starting at 9, we have panel 1, and they will be presenting, this word again, the music Jumbie, ancestral groundations in music and message. At 11 o'clock, we have Dreadness in intimate relationships. You're looking for horn. And at 1 p.m., form, meaning, and representation in the structure and style of Shadow's music. In between all of those presentations, we have short films about the impact of Shadow. At 3 p.m., there's a special convoi with especially invited guests. And finally, at 6 p.m., Mr. Samad just told you, we have 3 rousing DJs and inviting you to our Dingole dance party. Do join us tomorrow. Spread the word. Tell persons they can come for all of the day or part of the day of discourse and celebration. I am Jessel Murray, and it has been a pleasure to host you this evening on behalf of the Faculty of Humanities and Education, the University of the West Indies at St. Augustine. And now for our final performance tribute. KV Charles, an internationally known entertainer and graduate of the University of the West Indies at St. Augustine, was privileged to perform live in 2018 when Shadow received his honorary doctorate from the University of the West Indies. This evening, he reprises part of his performance with a closing tribute on this evening to Shadow. Thank you everybody for joining us. We hope to see you throughout the day tomorrow. On stage, KV Charles to take us home.
If a man is born in luxury, they prove to me through history he is somebody. But if a man is born in poverty, starvation and misery, he is nobody. Everybody is somebody. Nobody is nobody. Or the wealthy, everybody is somebody. Man could change my destination. Man could cause me sufferation. Man could treat me very evil. Man could get me into trouble. A man could take my wife, change my life, leave me to grief, but no man could change my belief. For I believe in the stars in the dark night. I believe in the sun in the daylight. I believe in the little children. I believe in life and its problems. Rob me, cheat me, feed me, but you can't change me. You could dig out my eye and then cause me to cry. You could tell me a lie, but you can't change me. No way, can't change me. Music sweet, music sweet. The one who invented music has got to be terrific. That would be the one who created the sun and the trees, rivers and seas, rivers and trees. Music fills the world with happiness, then its sweetness, and together